Hi everyone, my name is Molly, and today I just wanted to share a video that I've created with some tips and tricks on how to take the RICA and pass on your first try. I took it about a month ago and didn't start studying till maybe a week or two before. So yeah. But basically, what had stopped me from starting to study was just finishing up my CalTPA and procrastination, if we're being honest. But everywhere that I was looking, reading, hearing information, watching YouTube videos, people were telling me that I needed to buy a study book. I didn't want to spend any more money than necessary because the test is already $170. Insane. So this is not a test I wanted to take more than once, and the last week I really buckled down. I watched a ton of YouTube videos, did my own research, and I spent probably too much time or more time than I was necessary, I guess you could say. I think that it can be condensed into what I have here, which is literally 2 pages on a Word document. So I'm gonna go through this. Hopefully it's helpful. These are what I think you need to know after recently taking it. So first off, there's multiple sections to this test. There's a case study, there's multiple choice, and there's 4 other written portions. There's 2 lesson plans and 2 short answers. And for this test, the way that it's set up, the case study, which is the last problem on the test, has the most points. So that's the one that you really want to nail in. It's the longest. It's about 300 to 600 words in length is your, minimum and maximum word count. There's one way that I learned to set it up, and it worked for me, and it's clear, simple. I highly recommend it. So basically, that's where I started. Some people say you can start with looking at the case study, then go to the multiple choice and do the multiple choice, and go back to the case study. And the reason why they say to do it that way is because the multiple choice might have some strategies that you could then use in your case study. But honestly, I think you're gonna know the strategies already. And so why try to learn strategies or be reminded of strategies instead of just like knowing them going in and just getting them out there and done with the case study right away. So that's what I did. I started with the case study, and this is my simple outline to get it, nail it, be done with it, right? So first, as you're reading the case study, what is a case study? It has multiple evidence of student work, teacher responses, teacher notes, things like that. Basically, the case study reminded me if you took APUSH, like US or AP Euro, any like AP history in high school, you had to do DBQs, document-based questions. And that's kind of what the case study reminded me of, because you have all the student evidence and then you have to use that to create like an essay, right? So basically you go through, read it all, and as you're reading it, I honestly started by looking at needs, the students' needs. So I looked for, where could they show improvement? And one way to do this is also for looking at their strengths. So how and what did they do well? And then based off of that, where can they go from there? And later on in this video, I'm going to talk about the strengths and needs and what those are and how you can memorize them, the learning and the order of those. But for now, we'll focus on this outline. So first paragraph, we're going to do that strength, right? So one strength, tell me what it is and cite the evidence. How did you know that this was the student's strength? Do that again in your second paragraph. Then in your third paragraph, we're going to introduce 2 needs. So you'll say, this, based off of the student's examples, I saw that one need of the student is, another need of the student is, If you are doing your CalTPA or are just familiar with asset-based learning, using those like positive words and like not saying, the student is bad at this, right? We don't want to put the student down or use those negative connotations when writing this. So definitely just say like, the student's need is, that's completely fine, right? You're stating facts. And then what you're going to need to do is cite your evidence as always. And in your fourth paragraph is when you dive deeper into that first need. This is restating the need, easy, one sentence. In all of these, super straight to the point, clear, right? Restate your need. Then you're going to create a little lesson plan. The three things that I think are most important, or that I was told were most important, is showing your model, your guided practice, and your independent practice. So literally the I do, we do, you do, right? And just short and quick, exactly how that would look. And then third thing that you need to include in that paragraph is the benefit of your lesson plan, or the benefit of whatever strategy you were teaching or using to teach the student, right? So how did your instructional strategy, your instructional activity benefit the student? And without that, you won't get the point. So make sure that you definitely have that. And your last paragraph is going to be kind of similar structure to your fourth paragraph, right? So it's the same thing essentially, but you're just going off of the second need of that student. And there's really no need to wrap it up, right? You have a short word count, just put it all in there, state the benefit, and you'll be good to go. So then after doing this crazy, thing, I remember looking at the clock and thinking, oh my gosh, I finished this, but how am I gonna have enough time to do everything else? Don't worry about it. This takes the majority amount of time. And I'm a person who struggles the most at multiple choice. I always have. And so that's kind of where another strategy or tip that I have for you is with the multiple choice, there are 70. I can only have my attention span for about 20. After the 20th one, I noticed I had to reread questions more often. My brain was getting lost. It just wasn't good. I was getting tired, basically. So I did 20, and then I went and skipped down to the other writing. And then I did some of those, went back, did 20 more, went back and forth, right? You can skip around on the test, no big deal. It tells you which problems you viewed and which ones you've answered. It's super clear. So that, just do what you know is best for you. If you can sit down and bang out 20 or 70 multiple choice, do it. It won't hurt you to get it done because the multiple choice is what is weighted second most in this test. And with the multiple choice, there's practice problems online, and honestly, I did one practice test, and I think that you'll kind of get the gist after doing that. There's also some videos on YouTube already posted of people going over each question in a practice test. If that's something that would help you, I'd recommend it. Otherwise, don't spend too much time on it. You'll be okay. Then, for our 4 other written portions, we have 2 that I'm going to call like the lesson plan. They're about 150 to 300 words. So these are second longest, I guess. And for these, there's another specific outline that I highly recommend using because I think it's clear and straight to the point. And with these, you can do, paragraph form, or you can just number them out, honestly. They do allow you to use bullet points, and for me personally, I wrote more paragraph style for 1 and 2, and then as soon as I started my lesson plan, I did bullet points. So in this one, in the instructions, it only specifies that it needs a need. But I think that adding a strength can be helpful because then you, as a teacher, are able to show that you're using the student's assets to bring them up to their need. And it shows that you know kind of that order of learning and what the student needs to know, right? So I highly recommend it. State the strength. Next paragraph, state the need. And as always, citing the evidence that they've given you. How do you know that this is a strength or a need of that student? And you can say, like, in blah, 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 the student does this. You can say the exact word, quote it, whatever, be specific. And that shows that the student's strength is, that shows that the student's need is, right? Super straight to the point is what I recommend. Then we go into our lesson plan, and for all of these, I wrote strength, and then I wrote my paragraph. Need, wrote my paragraph. Lesson plan, wrote my paragraph, right? So lesson plan, then I wrote strategy. So what instructional strategy am I using? I'm going to tell you 2, and I honestly think you could pass just using these 2, and I'll tell you why in a little bit later. So state your strategy, 1 sentence. I use making words, or I use making words, blah, 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 so that we can focus on the student's need of, diagraphs, whatever it might be, okay? So state that strategy, state the materials that you need. We're gonna need flashcards that have the diagraph pH on it and the onsets and rhymes, blah, 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 right? So we need these cards and these cards with these letters on them. And maybe you need a chart to put the cards up on, or you need a whiteboard for the student to write it, or whatever, right? Come up with your materials, list them out. Steps, I would write steps, and then I would just do number 1, some sort of setup, right? Number 2, I showed the student how to make a word by blah, blah, blah. Number 3, I asked the student to, which is like a guided, right? You're telling the student what to do, you're interacting with the student, having them show you something, and working together. Then independent practice, another bullet point. Independently, the student, I had them do this activity using blah, 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 right? So it's just being super clear and showing that you know how to use like the I do, we do, they do strategy, or you do. And then lastly, again, similar to our case study, how we had to do the lesson plan and then the benefit, we have to do that again for our lesson plan at the end, listing our benefit. Make sure that you're explaining the strategy that you chose and how that strategy or approach meets the student's needs specifically. So this part might be a little bit more of a paragraph, not just 1 sentence, really making sure that you're explicit and explaining why and how. So then lastly, we have our short answer. I wouldn't stress about it, honestly. They might give you 1 piece of evidence and then you just have to answer the question that they give you. It's going to be more of like a situational, and you're just writing a paragraph. You guys got this, and honestly, knowing the strengths and needs will help you in each of your writing portions and in the multiple choice. So we'll just jump into those. This I highly recommend memorizing. So we have reading fluency and comprehension is one of our main portions of the test, right? So from kindergarten to 3rd grade is when students are focusing on learning to read. By 4th grade, we want fluency, right? Going into 4th grade, we want our students to be fluent, and that should be your main focus. If you get a student who is above 4th grade and they're not fluent, you really need to make sure that you're addressing those needs. So then from 4th grade to 8th grade, we're learning to read, right? We're not learning to read. We are reading to learn. So let's look at this order, and I have some acronyms that I have here, and I honestly just created these so that when I was on the test, the first thing I did before I even looked at the case study was write down all of these in order, so that when I'm finding my evidence, my needs, and my assets or strengths, I just look for the strength that the student had, and then the next thing up, what could they work on better, the need. Or I would look for, where did the student, have an error? That's the need. Okay, let's look and see if they had the strength before that. So whichever kind of pops out at you is what I would go for. But having this list was so helpful. So basically, going into kindergarten, we already kind of have, hopefully, some sort of concepts about print. So like knowing how to hold the book orientation, knowing that we read from left to right kind of thing, or just knowing that, words have meaning, right? And then we have phonemic awareness, so that that is when words have meaning, right? So phonemic awareness is that each, like we can hear sounds, and the sounds put together make words, and different characters, right? Our alphabet, our letters make up words, and they make up sounds. So these students gain, honestly, just from being exposed to literature, and being exposed to language, right? And then next up is letter sound correspondence. So letter sound correspondence, this is what we really start to stress in kindergarten, having students practicing their sounds, right? And how different letters can make multiple sounds. We also have onsets and rhymes. And this is when those making word strategies that we'll get into, that one is super helpful with this, because you can have the rhyme at, and you put that on a card, the AT, and then on your other cards you have C, and just other, consonants for that consonant, vowel, consonant word formation. But basically, yeah, I would highly recommend making words. Then phonics rules, we have polysyllabic words, sight words, and fluency. I could get into these a little bit more, but basically I would still recommend you could do making words or some sort of vocab. Like for sight words, I guess you would have, you could make a vocab chart, or which would be like a graphic organizer, which is my second tip we'll get into later. But just, making sure that the words are visible, and that, something I always like to have like that kinesthetic, type movement for the students. So yeah. Anyways, and then fluency, like I said, is by the time they are in 4th grade. And if you have done any sort of the reading test where, the student is reading and the teacher's marking how the student's doing, you'll, be familiar with fluency. I highly recommend looking at some of those. So anyways, we'll keep moving on. We'll go into after 4th grade. Students are now reading to learn. And basically, it starts off with literal comprehension, which is, asking questions that they can directly pull from that text. Then we have the inferential comprehension and evaluative comprehension. And basically, by evaluative, you want the students to be able to have those how. So for these, I would highly recommend thinking of questions that you would ask students to show you these types of comprehension, and then that you can put into your lesson plan and show examples of what you would ask the students, and that shows that you as a teacher can assess these types of comprehension. And as you're into the reading to learn, students should, since they're fluent, they should, be able to start developing higher levels of vocabulary. You might use, vocab more specific, like content specific vocabulary. And then also you can, start having words that, use inflections, derivations, and roots, and focusing on those to possibly learn more higher level vocabulary. And then lastly, contextual words. Also, students should, get their homophones, homographs, and homonyms correct. I did have a couple questions on this, and it was basically just like, I remember doing some sort of graphic organizer to have students, draw and write the words, and how homographs and graph, something visual, homophone, that kind of thing. So yeah, that is that. Okay, so we just went over our reading fluency and comprehension needs and strengths, and now I wanted to go over the stages of spelling because there is going to be a portion on specifically towards spelling, and so you don't want to go over and tell them something about reading when you should be using a spelling strategy, right? So we have 4 different stages: pre-phonetic, phonetic, transitional, and conventional. I gave an example here with if you ask a student to spell bread. In the pre-phonetic stage, this is when students are scribbling or drawing possibly something that could represent bread. They know that some sort of symbol is how language is written, right? Then we have phonetic, which is when the students are putting the dominant sounds. They know their letter to sound correspondence, and they're either, first starting out with the first sound of the word, the B in bread, and then they might, start doing BR, BRD, BRED. They hear the in bread, and they get that E in there. But it's just based off purely of sound. Then transitional is when the student is able to apply some sort of spelling pattern. So like it's really common, the silent E at the end, students start to learn that one, or they know that there's an A and an E, but they're not quite sure the order, that kind of thing. So here's a possible spelling of a transitional example of bread. Then we have conventional. So this is when the student shows the correct spelling. They've got it down, right? They've mastered bread. And basically, there's different tips for this and strategies you could use. And one that I saw multiple times on the test in the multiple choice and in my written responses, I had to talk about blends and diagraphs, especially like in my spelling. So like, for example, in the transitional, these are patterns, right, of spelling, these sounds. Some students might be able to hear the br because in the BR, that is brr. That's a blend, right? You hear the B and you hear the R. The easiest way for me to differentiate or remember the difference between blends and diagraphs is that blend literally has a blend in it, the BL. You hear the B and you hear the L, but they're just smushed together. Bull. Blend, right? You hear them both. So other example of that would be TR, truck, ST, street, street, DR, drive. You hear both sounds. Whereas a diagraph is when it takes the two words. Some popular ones are even in diagraph, the PH, right? That's how we also remember diagraphs, when they take two words and they blend to make the one sound. So we have sh. You don't hear a s, you hear sh. You don't hear p, you hear p. You hear see, I'm even getting confused. And the CH makes the ch sound. So you don't hear k, right? They essentially create one sound. And those are diagraphs. So having these, you can also use our making word strategy. So one of the 2 strategies that I highly recommend you use. And then lastly, I thought this was, a fun one because in shrimp, clearly the SH is a diagraph. But when having the R at the end, the sh with the R is blended. Shrimp, sure, right? So ultimately the SHR is a blend. And if you were teaching a student this, if you saw that they were making errors, maybe on a spelling test that you were given, then you could say, let's make a word strategy, and we're going to teach the students that SH makes the sh sound, right? And you could say that we're going to put these diagraphs on cards, and we're going to put these derivations or these roots on another card, and then let the students make words that way. Try different words out. See, have them see which words make sense and which ones don't. Then after after the making words strategy, I would say the second most helpful strategy that you could use on the RICA, and I want to remind you that you can use making words and some sort of graphic organizer. You can use those strategies multiple times because whoever's grading your test, they are not going to have read your other written portions. So it's going to be a different grader, or yeah, there's no way for them to know that you've used the same strategy more than once. So I highly recommend it because they're very flexible and adaptable. So any sort of graphic organizer that you could think of for like comprehension, you know, this could be a compare and contrast, you know, whatever type of text strategy or text structure that they're learning, right? Or with words, you could do some sort of vocab chart. You could do some sort of, you know, web. There's literally, you know, a T-chart. There's so many endless possibilities with different forms of graphic organizers. So yeah, those are the two. Don't get overwhelmed with the endless amounts of strategies that there are, because honestly, I feel like these two, if any, are the most important. You can get as creative as you want, but in general with this test, I wouldn't stress out about it. I would just, you know, take what you know and put it on the test, and, you know, memorize a couple formats for the case study or for the lesson plan, just so that you don't forget to input information, right? And then also like memorizing the strengths and needs for reading fluency and spelling, for example, and just knowing, you know, which stage comes after the next. So yeah, these are my tips. Don't get overwhelmed with the strategies. You can be, you know, you can come up with something creative if, you know, if it comes to you. If not, keep it simple, keep it straightforward, and you're gonna nail it. So good luck to everyone taking the test. I hope you pass. And thanks for watching. Bye!